Welcome to In Our Nature, St. John, where city streets meet salt marshes. St. John, New Brunswick ecosystems tell a story of resilience. Join us as we explore how nature and people coexist. The St. John Naturalists Club can be found under Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Nature St. John. Come study, conserve, educate, and enjoy nature together with us on the east coast of Canada. Donations are accepted at the Canada Helps website. Well, today we have with us Alfredo Justo, who is Curator of the Botany and Mycology at the New Brunswick Museum. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. Yeah. We have lots of questions about mushrooms.
Yeah, mushrooms always bring the questions.
Yeah,
for sure.
well, because, there's all this stigma around mushrooms. So which ones to eat, which ones not to eat, and, which ones can we touch. So what makes the St. John or the Bay of Fundy region unique for fungal diversity?
Well, I think we have exceptional habitat for fungi in general and for mushrooms in particular. All the forests near the Bay of Fundy, they are very humid forests. We get a lot of the fog during the summer. So that's something that mushrooms are going to like. We have lots of trees that we're going to see through the podcast. Probably we're going to touch on how fungi associate with trees. So we have a good diversity of trees. And we also usually get humidity throughout the summer season, which is something that they're going to like. And even as you get away from the coast in other parts of New Brunswick, we also have fantastic forest habitat. So that's always going to be a plus for fungi to find the habitat that they need to grow.
Now, it's interesting. I said fungi and you say fungi.
It doesn't matter.
Is it like tomato?
It's tomato.
Okay.
We're like many things in science and with scientific names, how you pronounce them. I'm from Spain originally, so I tend to pronounce Latin words as I would read them in Spanish, which is probably closer to Latin, but doesn't mean it's right. It's just the way I'm familiar with pronouncing names.
Right.
But however you pronounce scientific names is fine. Fungi, fungi, however you want to say it.
Okay, there's no wrong way. That's good to know. Thank you for that. Are there any specific habitats, like in the coastal forests or the salt marshes, that are especially rich in fungi?
There are most fungi that we look for, like I study mostly fungi that produce mushrooms. So I'm going to be looking at forest ecosystems. That doesn't mean that fungi are not present in marshes, that fungi are not present in the ocean or in the river. There's certainly fungi there. But for the fungi that actually produce mushrooms, you tend to focus in the forest ecosystems because most of the mushrooms are going to be associated with trees, whether it's associated with the roots of trees or whether it's decomposing all the wood and organic matter that is in the forest. So they tend to prefer that type of ecosystem. Again, doesn't mean that fungi are not present in other ecosystems. But when you're looking for mushrooms, you're mostly are going to stay within forest ecosystems.
Do they have a preference for like humidity near salt water or fresh water, or is it just different?
Like for dealing with salt water, fresh water, you will be mostly dealing with microfungi, and those are very different than the mushrooms that we're usually looking for when you go out in the field looking for mushrooms. But definitely all environmental conditions are going to be preferred by certain species and other species are going to avoid those particular conditions. So for microfungi, for aquatic fungi, those are going to be important parameters, whether you look at fresh water or salt water or marshes. But for mushrooms, again, we're going to stay mostly in the forest.
Okay. And are there any fungi in New Brunswick that you would consider rare, endemic, or understudied perhaps?
Well, understudied, is the general field, I would say. Okay. We're making big progress, but we're starting from, I would say, a position of disadvantage compared to what we know versus plants or birds or mammals. The baseline information that we have about what species of fungi do we have here, we started in a position where we still have a long way to go to have a good sense of the species that we have. So we do have species of fungi that are probably rare. We have species of fungi that are probably regional. I wouldn't say exclusively New Brunswick, but probably this part of Canada and the northeastern United States that are probably just in this area. But we are just finding this out right now. We're making the catalog of the species of mushrooms that we have.
Is there like a life list of mushrooms, like there is a life list of birds?
There is a life list of mushrooms and any other organisms, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it today. But the MycoMap project, which is the DNA sequencing project that involves community scientists across Atlantic Canada, that's what we're trying to do, is cataloging every single mushroom species that we have.
Right.
And we are basically at the same time creating baseline data of what we have, but we're also in the process already finding very interesting things. We're finding species that are not described yet, that still have to be formally described, that don't have a scientific name yet. Okay. We're finding things that we suspect are going to be pretty rare. So these are things that probably should have some type of conservation assessment to see how rare they are, where are they distributed, what habitat do they grow on, because usually for fungi, when it comes to conservation, it's going to be preserving the habitat where they grow. That's probably the most direct approach to conserving fungi. So we're finding a lot of things, and we're starting to get a sense of things that are common, things that are rare, but we're doing everything at once. So it's generating like very basic data about just the catalog of a species, and at the same time already highlighting some things in that catalog that are particularly interesting.
You know, I'm thinking that a lot of your research would be sort of in the here and now, in the present world. But can we tell if there was maybe a mushroom species that was prevalent 200 years ago, that maybe it was in decline because the environment changed, but now it's changed to be more adaptive to that mushroom when we're seeing it again in abundance? Like, can we see what happened in the past? Or is that not possible?
Like for us, I would say in general, in North America, that would be, with some exceptions, of course, but in general, it would be difficult to do because in many cases, we lack the baseline data from 50 years ago, 75 years ago, 100 years ago. If you tell me about Europe, for example, there are plots and regions and certain regions of Europe that have been studied in excruciating detail for over, I would say at this point, 100 years sometimes, 75 years.
Right.
Like the Netherlands, for example, in Europe has had a mapping of mushrooms project, I think since the 60s or 70s. So every single little square has been mapped for presence of mushrooms. So you can look back at those data from 50 years ago and see how it has changed over time. We are creating that baseline data right now for us.
Wow.
So, but we don't have that data.
So it's very important work.
It is very important work because that, as you were saying, that allows you, by creating the baseline data, we obviously don't have the equivalent from 50 years ago, but people 20 years in the future, 30 years in the future, are going to be able to look at our data and see, oh, that's what, those were the species of mushrooms that were present in New Brunswick at that point in time. Right. Do we still have them? And especially looking for rare species or things that grow in particularly special habitats. How are those faring 10, 15, 20 years from now?
And would that be an indicator of environmental change? Could be climate change or, I guess, other influences in our environment. Could it tell us anything else?
They could tell you that things are changing, and then you have to find the reasons of why they're changing.
Why they're changing.
That's if you were to design a scientific project that somebody will take on, and it can be a professional scientist, it can be a community scientist, somebody who's not professionally a scientist. Many of the ecology, even ecological conservation-related projects back in Europe, they're in many cases done in collaboration or even led by mycological societies, which have members from all walks of life. They don't have to be scientists. So, it will tell us, if we look at how the distribution, the presence of a species change over time, and if you see changes or trends, that obviously is telling you something. Are they changing because of human activity? Are they changing because of more general climate change related processes? So what is the cause? That's a different, you will have to set up the proper experimental design to answer those questions. But what the baseline data is going to tell you, hey, this trend is here. Why is it here? That's the second part of the question.
Okay, yeah. And just moving away from the science of it, you know, the novice like me who knows nothing about mushrooms, other than the ones I buy at the grocery store.
You were on a Myco and B walk. You have a one-on-one on mushrooms at least.
I do have one-on-one, yes. I've been on one of your walks and they're amazing. If our listeners ever get the opportunity, you definitely need to go.
Yeah.
They're fascinating and I learned a lot. But why should people care about fungi beyond the mushrooms we can see?
Well, I think people should care about all organisms on Earth. But I'm a biologist, so I'm kind of like, I'm biased in that sense. I think
it's a good bias to have.
Yeah, but I think anybody who has an interest in nature appreciates the natural world and understands, obviously, that humans have impacted how species exist on Earth today. And that we also have a responsibility to make sure that we don't further degrade or make a species disappear. And I think that's intrinsic to the values of us as another species that is not outside natural processes happening on Earth today. We tend to think of us very removed from nature.
Oh, yes.
We're not.
Yes.
And Mother Nature always wins. And it would be good for us to remember that. But in general, I think people should care, not only because mushrooms, yes, you find mushrooms because they're edible, and that's fun, foraging for mushrooms, getting some mushrooms in your basket, bringing them back, cooking, sometimes with family, friends. It's a really nice experience to have. Beyond that, I think mushrooms are fascinating and beautiful, and they have all sorts of shapes, colors, ways of growing, ways of interacting with other organisms that to me are extremely fascinating. So I think anybody who has even an ounce of curiosity about the natural world, if you get down the fungal path, the mushroom path, you will want to know more and more and more about them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I certainly do. So that's why I asked you to come here today. And what roles do fungi play in the forest health and the nutrient cycling?
Well, mushrooms are the recyclers of forest ecosystems on Earth. So think of all the leaves. Think when a plant dies, when a tree dies, all the wood that stays in the forest. Who is going to be breaking down all those components that usually very hard to break down from a chemical point of view? Well, that's fungi. Fungi are the recyclers. The same way that we put out our recycling bins out in the curbside to be picked up, that's what the fungi are doing in the forest. Many of them are just breaking down all those components and bringing down the elements, the carbon, the nitrogen, the individual elements back to the cycling of nutrients, of elements that happens on Earth. So that's one role that fungi have in forest ecosystems. The other one, and that we are less aware because usually if you see mushroom growing on a pile of something, you can already tell intuitively that it's probably feeding on that thing. But many fungi, the way they get their food is by being associated with the roots of trees. Those are called mycorrhizal fungi. And mycorrhizal is a word that is composed of myco, which means fungus, and rhizal, which means root. So it literally means root fungus or fungus in a root. So mycorrhizal fungi, the fungus itself, and this is not something that we have mentioned so far, but that's something that I always mention in my walks, is that when we talk about fungi, we're talking about the actual organism. When we talk about mushrooms, we're talking about the fruit of the organism. The actual organism is the fungus. Okay. A mushroom is just the fruit. Think of an apple, an orange, a strawberry. It's just the fruit of an organism, a plant, that is producing those fruits. Fungi are the same way. The organism, the fungus, we don't see it most of the time. What we see is the fruits that the organism is producing. So with mycorrhizal fungi, the fungus itself is wrapped around the roots of trees and other plants. And when the time is right, usually summer, fall for us, it will produce the mushrooms that we see. And those mushrooms usually are going to be close to the tree where the fungus is living, because that is where the organism is living. So when you look for chanterelles, when you look for hedgehog mushrooms, when you look for porcini, all of those mushrooms that I just mentioned, they're mycorrhizal. So the fungus itself is associated with some type of tree that is living there, and when the time is right, it's going to produce the mushrooms.
But we can't see that fungus.
You cannot see it. You will have to dig and look at the roots. If you would take a little piece of the root of the tree, bring it back to the lab, and put it under the microscope, you will see the actual fungus. You will see the little threads, the hyphae. That's what the cells of a fungus are called. You will see them wrap around the roots of the tree. And that type of association is fundamental for all plants and for forest ecosystems.
Yeah.
Like, we see the mushrooms, so we can tell they're there, but we don't see the fungus. And without that association, plants wouldn't have been able to basically colonize Earth and form this forest that we see around. So we always see the trees, we always see the plants, we see the animals living there. We don't see the fungi, but they're always there. And without them, there will be no forest. Because plants would not be able to make it the way they have made it over millions of years.
Right.
So they're kind of the silent workers of the forest. They're there, but we are not always aware of what they're doing.
Yeah, I was on a hike recently. And I'm a big hiker. I love to hike in the forest, and someone said, the forest doesn't really want you to leave. I never really thought of it from that perspective. They want you to stay there and feed all the animals. And have you personally encountered a new species that here are there many?
Yes, we actually have quite a few.
Oh, wow.
And we have, again, through the MycoMap project, which is the project that is a North American-wide project coordinated at Mycology Labs in Michigan in the States with Stephen Russell. And this project tries to get community scientists for across North America to document the mushrooms they find, put photos on iNaturalist, which I think most people who are in a naturalist club are familiar with iNaturalist. So that documents the mushroom, but also just dry the mushroom, make a collection of it, and send it to your local coordinator for DNA analysis. That's the sciencey part of it. And here in Atlantic Canada, we have our own project. It's not restricted to New Brunswick because we thought it would make sense for all the Atlantic provinces to collaborate together. So it's MycoMap Atlantic Canada. And we have people in all Atlantic provinces collecting mushrooms, keeping a collection, and sending it for DNA analysis. We do a lot of the coordination at the New Brunswick Museum, but we also have people in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So it has been a great project. And we actually started just a few weeks ago a Myco Mondays series at the New Brunswick Museum, where every Monday we post something through social media, just highlighting a small result from the project. Because at this point we have over 6,000 collections with DNA sequences, and that's a lot of work. We're still going through them.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Having the DNA sequence is kind of the start, and then you have to sit down and
do something with it.
Figure out what it means, and just from those over 6,000 collections that we have sequenced from Atlantic Canada, we already have documented over 1,500 species of mushrooms in Atlantic Canada. And that's probably about half of it. We estimate that we probably are in the over 3,000 species. So
that feels overwhelming. Do you know all of them?
No, I wouldn't know all of them. That's not a task that I don't think anybody... With mycology, you learn really soon that if you see something in the field and you can get it down to genus and you can get it down to kind of species group, you are lucky.
Okay.
You are lucky. You can say, oh, this is something in this particular genus and is around this species. Sometimes for a few common things, yes, you can get down to species pretty quick. For most things in the field, you're going to be able to get to species group, and that's fine. That's the nature of fungi. That's you know that the morphology of the mushroom itself, the ecology of the mushroom, where you are geographically is only going to take you so far. Right. There are other parts to it. Then there is the microscopic study, there is the DNA study, and then there is the putting all the pieces together and figuring out what it means. And that's exactly what we're trying to do right now. Just putting all the pieces together in terms of morphology, looking at mushrooms in the field, photographing them, putting them on iNaturalist. And the great thing about this project is that when DNA sequences are produced, they immediately get posted to iNaturalist. Mm-hmm. So the person who contributed that collection immediately knows that, yes, we got a DNA sequence for it. That second half, the figuring out what everything means, that takes a little bit more time, but we're working on it.
Okay. What I fear when I see mushrooms out in the field is I don't know what I don't know. So do we have any poisonous mushrooms?
We do have poisonous mushrooms.
Like not to touch them?
Not to touch them is always fine. You only have to be really concerned about poisonous mushrooms when you're foraging. Okay. That you have to be really aware of what you're putting in your basket to bring back home. That's when you have to be concerned about what you are collecting. And that's when we're talking about foraging, collecting mushrooms for eating. I always tell people, if you're foraging for mushrooms to eat, you should be already in the field, be sure that that's something edible. Right. It's fine to collect mushrooms that you don't know what they are, to bring back home and figure out what they are. But I don't think those mushrooms should be in your plans for eating at any point. Like, if you're foraging, you should be in the field confident that what you're collecting is edible. You know what species or a species group that mushroom is. You know that is safe. You should know that in the field. And again, the other part, the bringing mushrooms that you don't know what they are, that's great. But that's for a different that's for a different purpose. That's to figure out what they are.
Right. And so it makes you wonder, are there any other animals that eat mushrooms?
Yes, many mammals eat mushrooms. Squirrels eat mushrooms. Many invertebrates, insects, and larvae. Sometimes you have to get to the mushrooms before some of these other forest creatures you're fighting, especially when you're foraging, to get to the really tasty ones before they do, because there are many other forest creatures that are looking for mushrooms as a food source. So yeah, there are many.
Would they intrinsically know which ones not to eat?
Well, it's different because we don't necessarily have the same metabolism as every other animal on the planet.
So another animal can eat something
that might be toxic for us might not necessarily be toxic to something else.
So in other words, if I see another animal eating it, doesn't necessarily
the only rule that applies to knowing edible mushrooms is knowing the mushroom. There is no other rule.
Okay, so what does a typical day in the field look like for you?
A day in the field usually starts pretty early in the morning. And it depends New Brunswick is, if you have to drive to northern New Brunswick, it will be a long field day. Right. But if I'm in the southern part of the province, it usually starts early, go out in the field and collect for like a full day. So I would say from 9 a.m. up to 4 in the afternoon. If I'm collecting, I'm usually collecting for science, so I'm interested in preserving those collections to bring back to the museum. So what I would do, I will be collecting all day, and then I will bring back those collections, and I either leave them at the museum to be processed the next day, or bring them home and bring them to the museum the next day. What I would do the following day after being out in the field is make notes of the collection. All the collections, when I'm in the field, I'm taking photographs of every single collection. And I'm making notes of every single collection. What was the habitat? Was that collected under a birch tree or under a spruce or on a piece of wood? What was the ecology? I'm documenting that. I'm taking the photos in the field. I'm making notes about characters that are gonna be lost during the drying process, like smell. Smell is a very important character for identification for many mushrooms. So you have to note those type of characters in the field or very quickly in the lab when you bring back the collections. But a full day in the field is just me looking for mushrooms. Mostly I tend to work in the protected natural areas of New Brunswick, and those are the ones that I tend to visit more often. We also have permits at the museum for collecting both at Fanti National Park and Kuchipukwak National Park. And those are spaces where you normally wouldn't be able to collect. We do have the permits to do scientific collecting, so we are cataloging the mushrooms there. But yeah, a day in the field is just me.
Are you looking for sorry to interrupt you, are you looking for any mushroom, or are you looking for would you pass by the more common and looking for something more unique?
At this point, I'm able to kind of discern there are certain mushrooms that are extremely common, that have already gone through the DNA sequencing, that we are pretty sure that's the species that it is. So you have to be selective because we don't have an infinite amount of space to keep every single collection. So we do, there is some selection in the field about filtering out things that are extremely common. But even at these early stages, I'm trying to be careful with that, because sometimes things that we think is just, this is this one species that is extremely common. And then you go through the DNA and it's like, oh no, it's not. It's not that. Or yes, it's that, but there is also this one or two other species that look very similar. So sometimes even in the field, the external morphology, the ecology of the mushroom can only get you so far. There is always the microscopy part, there is always the DNA part, and there is the putting the pieces together part.
So if you saw a chanterelle growing in an environment where it would normally be, that would be of interest.
That would be of interest,
even though
for
it's
me.
a common
Correct.
mushroom.
Yeah. Like for example, chanterelles, hedgehog mushrooms. We had a project a few years ago that was specifically for those. And when you're doing a project that is specifically for a group, you're broadly collecting anything that belongs to the group. But once you get those initial results, now I have a better idea. For example, for chanterelles, we know we have one very common species, Cantharellus enelensis, the Newfoundland chanterelle, and that's our common chanterelle here. So if I see things that look like that, probably most of the time I'm not going to collect them. But if I find something that may look like that species, but it's in a habitat that is not the typical one, or it has an external morphology that is not the typical one, that would be maybe a collection that I would make and look further
deeper into it. Okay. And what's the most challenging part of studying fungi in the wild?
I don't find anything super challenging. I mean, especially when you're doing field work, there's no challenge. Maybe not get eaten by a bear, I guess. It's not just being in the forest is great. Maybe the fact that you cannot collect and study every single thing. There are limits to what, even if I were to collect every single mushroom that I see, because there are all these other parts connected to identifying a mushroom, I simply do not have the time to go every single one of them. So that's kind of sometimes can be challenging, that deciding part of what should I collect? How do I make sure that, that's a common species, I don't need to collect it. So sometimes that's the kind of what you have to decide in the field. But other than that, looking for mushrooms, I can think of so many other groups of organisms that are so much more difficult.
Well, at least they don't have legs. I mean, you don't have to chase them.
I don't have to chase them. You
just have to find them.
But the finding is such a kind of a treasure hunt experience that is so rewarding. Every time you go out in the field, it's such a rewarding experience. What I would say that sometimes is frustrating, again, you're looking for fruits, and the fruit is not always there. And sometimes, like last year, you get a horrible, horrible dry summer, forest fires that prevent you to go out and will prevent even the fungi to produce the mushrooms, because if there is no rain, if there is no humidity, they're not going to have the conditions for a good year.
Yeah, it was a bad year last year.
So things like that, like maybe going through drought periods where the mushrooms are not going to be there, we didn't have any rain. That's the trickiest part. But once you're in the field looking for them, I would say, an amazing experience.
So is there a time of year or a time of day that it's best to go out? Like, we've had a lot of water. I mean, obviously it's springtime, so, but is it warm enough?
For some tiny things, yes. Like at this point, if you go out in the field and look for fungi, you're going to find them. You're not going to find the chanterelles yet. You're not going to find the porcinis yet, but you're going to find a lot of tiny mushrooms, especially the ones that grow on pieces of wood, things that already have humidity. There are a few fungi that they don't mind the cold temperatures that we still have. So I've seen posts already from members of the Mycology Society that are going out and they're finding things. Obviously, they're not the chanterelles yet. They're not the porcinis yet, but there are things out for sure. Our season, if we're talking in general about mushrooms, of what most people would be out there looking, especially for foraging, I would say starts July and goes until October, early November. Those are the months where you're going to see most mushrooms out in the field. Again, you can see fungi, you can see mushrooms any other time. They're just going to be a different kind. But I would say July, August. July, if we get our summer rains, that is often common, is when chanterelles start. You can find porcinis already in July. Also, as you move into August, it depends on the lack of the draw. Is it going to be a rainy summer? Is it going to be a dry summer? If it's a rainy summer, August is fantastic for mushrooms in New Brunswick. And then you get in September, October. September, I would say, is the peak of mushroom season in New Brunswick, usually, because you still get some of the things that have been fruiting over the summer are still fruiting in September, but you start getting the fall mushrooms, which is a whole different set of species. So you get the overlap of both groups of mushrooms. So September usually there is abundance and there is variety. You see many different things.
Okay.
Early in the season, late in the season, is very common that you might see a lot of mushrooms, but it's kind of always the same things because there are fewer species that fruit at the tail ends of the season, but kind of in the center of the season there is overlap and everything is fruiting. Right. And again, you're always depending on weather. If there is not and I think for the most part is if it gets too warm and without rain, you're not going to see a lot of mushrooms. Right. You need humidity, and it needs to be warm, but not scorching hot. You want, humidity to stick around, and which is usually the case for the summers in New Brunswick. We usually get a decent amount of rain, July, August, that makes for a good summer season for mushrooms. But again, depends on the year.
I'm going to recap what you said, but the mushroom is the fruit and the fungi is the organism. That's sort of like the plant, if you will.
Yeah.
So what happens to the fungi in wintertime? Does it go dormant? Does it die?
No, it doesn't die. Most fungi, especially the ones that are associated with the roots of trees, they're still doing their normal metabolic activity. The tree, for example, many trees, especially the ones that lose the leaves, they go through a period where they're not as metabolically active as when they have the leaves out. Like think of birch. Obviously during the winter it doesn't have any leaves, it's just waiting for the spring. But the fungus is there. And what the mycorrhizal fungi, for example, are doing all of the time, winter or other seasons, is they're helping the tree getting nutrients and water from the soil, because the fungus, the actual body of the fungus is just thousands of really tiny thin threads that go everywhere in the soil. So they can get places where the root cannot get. So that facilitates the fact that the water, the nutrients that they're getting, it goes into the tree, and in exchange, what the fungus is getting from the tree is the sugars that the tree is producing through photosynthesis. Because fungi are like us. Like plants, they're fine. They just need some nutrients, some soil, sunlight. They do photosynthesis, they create their own food. Fungi are like animals. They cannot create their own food. They have to get it somewhere. And mycorrhizal fungi have figured out an exchange system with the plants. I give you access to water and nutrients, you give me some of your sugars. And that works for both organisms.
So it doesn't hurt the tree. They
No.
actually work together.
Mycorrhizal fungi are symbiotic fungi, so it's a symbiosis.
Symbiotic,
It's a beneficial association for both. And there has been a lot of in recent years, more scientific research about the exact nature and mechanisms of symbiotic relationships. It's not always as clear cut, but overall, that's the big picture. The plant is getting something from the fungus is getting something from the plant, and the plant is benefiting greatly from having those fungi associated with the roots.
Is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like to share?
Well, fungi are endlessly fascinating organisms that usually require just a tiny bit more effort to study them than other things that we see all the time, like plants or birds or mammals. But they're extremely rewarding if you put in the time to study fungi and to study mushrooms and to learn about their morphology. We have this fantastic, absolutely fantastic tool now, which is DNA sequencing, that is giving us a lot of information. And it might sound intimidating, or DNA sequencing, that sounds very sciencey, I don't know about it. The people who are driving this MycoMap project across North America are volunteer people, are people from all walks of life whose day job is not being a mycologist. And they just want to learn. They just want to learn about mushrooms and fungi. So if you're interested, just look into it. Go to mycomap.org, mycomapac.org if you want to go to the specific Atlantic Canada one. Get in touch with me at the New Brunswick Museum. And just be curious about fungi and about mushrooms. There is still so much to learn about them.
Okay, I think I lied. Afraid I have one last question.
Okay, well, we can take one more.
If somebody wants to go on a mushroom walk with you,
Yeah.
how do they find you, or how do they find when you're going?
MycoMB, the Mycological Society of New Brunswick, has monthly walks. We usually have walks around St. John, around Moncton, and around Fredericton. There are some spring walks that have been already announced. Mine usually start in July. I usually do one walk in July, one in August, one in September, one in October through MycoMB. But then I also do walks for other organizations. I have done walks with the St. John Naturalists Club for many years, at least once a year I do. And other people from other clubs usually also get in touch to have walks. But MycoMB is your place to go, because it's not only me, it's everybody in the society, and I'm not the only person leading walks. We have people in Fredericton, we have people in Moncton. We try to do walks in other parts of the provinces of the province, but that's the place to go. And members of the MycoMB Society get a newsletter telling them when those walks are happening. It's going to be on the webpage. You can go to the Facebook page of the MycoMB Society and you can find walks. But again, mine for the season are not announced yet because I still have to figure out the dates. But my first one is going to be July. But the society has already some spring walks in the books, so go check them out.
And I encourage people to go out and try one.
Absolutely, I would encourage people to go out, even if you're not a member yet, or if you're not sure about joining the society, go to one walk. You're welcome to go and just see what it's all about. And if you like it, just become a member of the society. Become curious, and you will have more people to share your passion for fungi with.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and all your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank you, everyone, for stopping by to listen to In Our Nature St. John today. Remember, we can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Nature St. John. Donations are accepted through the Canada Helps website. We host events every month, and they can be found listed on our website at stjohnnaturalistclub.org/events. Please follow and subscribe to our monthly podcast, and if you have any ideas for discussion, let us know in the comments. Until next time.